Powered by Righteous Media.
Welcome to Independent Americans. Welcome to episode 339. I'm your host, Paul Rieckhoff. And after a week of protests, no King's protests, I'm coming to you from, of all places, Prince Street. Seems appropriate for a time when people all across the country are pushing back to say they don't want kings in this country. But we've got National Guard deployed in at least 4 states, federal troops on the way as well, a possible war unfolding with Israel and Iran, and no shortage of stress all across America. As the summer heats up here in Soho and across America, now is most definitely a time to stay vigilant. Here in New York, there's only about a week left of public school. Then the summer really begins. But before that happens, I'm bringing back a guy who's kind of a professor for America, a true teacher to all of us, especially longtime fans of this show. Coming up next, we're bringing back one of my favorite guests and yours, the great author, thinker, and conscience for America, Sebastian Junger, is back to break it all down. You're not going to want to miss this extensive, smart, thoughtful, insightful conversation with one of my favorite guys to rap with about everything. But first, as the vendors hit the streets, people start wearing less, the ice cream trucks come out, the kids get ready to run through sprinklers, and summer starts to fully blossom. Before we get to that, and Sebastian, I got a couple of the top stories that you need to pay attention to that you may have missed. Here they are, my top topics. Here's maybe the top topic above all others. Donald Trump is blowing through every single guardrail designed to protect our troops and our democracy. He deployed National Guard troops into LA, and he should have gotten congressional approval, and he didn't. Then he sent the active duty into California and should have gotten congressional approval, but he didn't. Then he sent federal troops into Louisiana, Texas, and Florida. You probably didn't even hear about that. And of course, he should have gotten congressional approval for that, and he did not. And now he's contemplating engaging with Iran, potentially sending strikes to try to topple that government and take out their nukes. And of course, he should get congressional approval. But he won't, because he doesn't abide by any normal conventions. The guardrails don't stop him, the Democrats won't slow him down, and America is at a perilous crossroads, where our president is recklessly, dangerously, abusively running through every single barrier designed to protect our military and our democracy from an overreach in power. So by the time you watch or see this, there may already be U.S. airstrikes in Iran. But remember what I would consider a golden rule of warfare. First, commit the country, then commit the troops. Every single time in American history a president has committed the troops first and the country later, it's led to disaster. Think about Iraq. Think about Vietnam. Think about so many other examples in modern history. The golden rule of getting our country behind something first before you put our troops into it, it's one that we are going to hit now. More importantly, more urgently, and maybe more dangerously than ever before. So as Trump continues to blast through every barrier around our democracy, whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, and especially if you're an independent, this summer, with America at a potential breaking point, is most definitely a time to stay vigilant. And as I record this on Wednesday, it's just been announced that another 2,000 National Guard troops are headed into Los Angeles. Another 2,000 that have not been asked for by the governor. Another 2,000 that are being taken away from being prepared for wildfires and any other number of real threats facing California. Another 2,000 that Trump is unfairly politicizing. And as I've long warned, This is just the start. He continues to deploy more troops in more places, abusing his authority and blowing past the guardrails. He wants you to think this is normal. It's not normal, it's not acceptable, and it's increasingly dangerous. And meanwhile, in Israel and in Iran, missile strikes and bombs continue to drop as a world sits on edge wondering if this Middle Eastern war will expand and whether Americans will get involved. Now, there's a case to be made for limited American military strikes, especially to defend the over 40,000 U.S. troops that are in the region. There's another case to be made that this is a point for America to stand with Israel and finally remove the Iranian nuke threat. A point to remember, despite Trump's Trumpness, the Iranians are an enemy of America. They are no ally. For decades, Iranian proxies have been killing Americans. From the time I was in Iraq to the times they've been lobbing missiles on military bases in Syria and Iraq around the world. The Iranians and their proxies want to kill Americans. And if we have an opportunity to remove that threat, we should consider it. We should debate it as Americans, and if necessary, take action. Because Trump might support something doesn't mean that it's not necessary. Meanwhile, an important point to remember. China has been moving additional naval resources closer to Taiwan. Because while Americans continue to battle in the streets, as we continue to send our forces into places like Los Angeles, and we potentially allocate more resources to the Middle East, China is patiently waiting. Never forget that China is the most significant, most formidable adversary on the global chessboard. And while America continues to eat its own and remain divided, China and our enemies are celebrating. Meanwhile, this weekend, a weekend that was uniquely perilous, where we had Trump's military parade in Washington, hundreds of protests across the country. In the middle of all of that, we woke up on Saturday to find out about a political assassination in Minnesota. Another stark reminder of just how dangerous politics can be in America. As a Minnesota lawmaker and her husband were brutally gunned down by a radical extremist. It's a reminder that radical extremists remain our number one national security threat. It's also a reminder that political violence has become a new normal in America. Remember when Paul Pelosi was attacked with a hammer? Remember when Donald Trump was shot? And there are countless other unsuccessful examples that we know about, and even more that we don't. We'll never know how many political attacks were stopped. But what we do know is that attacks on lawmakers is an unfortunate, dark new normal. And I think Congress needs to make it a true national priority and consider that maybe every lawmaker in America needs personal security. Because when American elected officials of any party or no party at all are unsafe, all Americans are unsafe. And as America continues to teeter on a dangerous and unprecedented edge, coming up, we're going to talk to Sebastian Junger, the brilliant author who created books like Tribe, films like Restrepo, and a book that would later become a movie, The Perfect Storm. But before we get to Sebastian and the storm that's constantly raging around America, here's a few quick stories that might be below your radar. Behind me is an American flag. And this weekend, all across America, those flags were flown. At Trump's military charade in Washington that thankfully went off without a hitch, but was no less politicized and inappropriate. And here's what's most significant. There was no violence. No one was killed. No one was even seriously injured. And the most noteworthy part of it was that they happened. They came out to demonstrate what that flag is really all about. Freedom. They spoke their minds peacefully and organized in cities big and small all across America. And here's what I want to do. I want to give props to everybody. To the National Guardsmen, to the active duty troops, to all the law enforcement, and most of all, to the patriotic protesters around the country who showed discipline, who showed patriotism, and showed restraint, and showed the best of what America can be. Yes, we are divided, but it's the American people who can rise to the moment most powerfully. And it's not the Republicans or the Democrats that'll save us. It's you. It's independent Americans nationwide standing up for that flag and for each other. Because in our darkest times, our most brilliant, our most powerful, our most important patriots will rise to meet that moment. And that might just mean you. And speaking of freedom, there's a group of people who continue to stand up and fight and die for freedom every single day. And it will never fall below the radar of this show. It's something we will always continue to focus on. And that is the brave and courageous fight of the Ukrainian people that continues right now as I record this, as you listen to it, as you watch this. Every single day, Ukrainians are fighting and dying for freedom. And although President Zelensky is leaving the G7 without any additional support from Trump, without even a meeting from Trump, there is progress. Democratic Senator Blumenthal and Republican Senator Lindsey Graham now have over 80 co-sponsors to support their legislation to increase overdue, necessary sanctions on Russia. This should have happened a long time ago, but it's finally happening now. And I and millions of independent Americans and American veterans Ukraine all strongly support this legislation. So if you haven't called your member of Congress yet and told them to support the increased sanctions on Russia, the time to do it is now. Because we're standing up here in our own ways for freedom and democracy. But in Ukraine, they are putting their lives on the line every day. And the least we can do is call a couple senators and members of Congress. No one made a greater mistake than he or she who did nothing because they could only do little. So after this show, pick up the phone, send an email, and let them know that you want them to immediately support increased sanctions on Russia now. Keep fighting, Ukraine, and know that tens of millions of Americans have your back. Slava Ukraine. The last few weeks in America have been especially intense, especially around the intersection of national security and our politics. And I've been all over the place. I've done more interviews in the last couple of weeks than I probably have in years, from News Nation to MSNBC to CNN. And I want to thank all of you, especially who've reached out to offer your support, and especially to our Patreon members. If you're not a Patreon member, go to independentamericans.us now and become one of them. And our Patreon members are going to get exclusive extra content for this episode and as many others as I can create. But you help fuel this movement. So thank you for your support. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and share right now. In times like this especially, we need people to help us make sense of what's happening, to understand our past and think about the future. And with everything going on in the world right now, I am so thrilled to be bringing back in this episode one of my favorite guests, one of my favorite people, one of my favorite thinkers, one of my favorite independent Americans. He's an author. He's a father. He's a shit starter. And he's a patriot. And he's our friend, Sebastian Junger. Sebastian's back to take us through all of it. If you've heard him on this show before, you know why I'm excited. If you haven't, you're in for a treat. But this is a time for voices who will add light to contrast the heat. And there's none finer than Sebastian Junger. So in this time of stress and turmoil, look for the helpers. Look for the teachers. Look for the leaders. And look for the people who bring light to contrast the heat. People like Sebastian Junger. So welcome to my conversation with a true light bringer. Welcome to a summer that could be a breaking point for America. Welcome to Independent Americans, episode 339. Ladies and gentlemen, independent Americans around the country and around the world, this is a summer of heat. Whether it's hot in your area or not, it is hot in America, and it is a very perilous time. One of the most important times that I have experienced in my life, and I want help making sense of it. And this week especially, I wanted to reach out to a conscience for our nation, a guy who understands the soul of America and is very good at predicting what happens next, and just has a humility and honesty about all things that seems to be lacking in the national conversation. Our friend, a six-time returning champion, the great and powerful Sebastian Junger is back. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
So I was saying I was trying to fix the lighting, but it ain't going to help me. No matter what I do, I ain't going to be as pretty as Pete Hegseth.
No, that's right. And yeah, I was looking at him the other day. He was sitting with Trump and Melania watching the birthday parade, and Trump really, I mean, you can't read too much into expressions, but Trump really looked like he was not in a happy place during that parade. He looked pretty furious. Melania looked unbelievably bored, right? And then Hegseth, I was looking at him, I was like, what is it about that dude? Like, and he reminds me of something. I finally realized he looks a little like a crocodile. He's like a really, really handsome crocodile, right? There's something about his face that squishes down a little bit. I'm like, he's one handsome dude, but he's a handsome crocodile. And then once I thought of that, I felt better for the rest of the day.
Well, I'm hoping you'll help us have a lot of little gems that will help us feel better for the rest of the day. I mean, Trump was probably pissed in part because directly across from him were empty seats, lots of empty seats. I thought you were going to tell me Hegseth looks like the devil because he feels more and more like that by the day. Dude, there's so much to get into, and you are such a master of kind of ripping apart, especially the civil-military divide. But let's just start. All this shit is happening.
Yep.
Where are you, and how the hell are you, man?
Well, I'm in New York. I got two little girls, 8 and 5. The future of the country and the planet is enormously important to me. And I'm doing what I can. I hate what's happening, but I don't feel it's. I have some very upset liberal friends who are like, the sky is falling. I'm like, you know what? Let's not use up that sentence until it is falling, right? Like, I don't like what's going on, but let's sort of keep our powder dry a bit for what really could be violation of our core constitutional rights. Like, let's save those bullets for that situation. And I'm very heartened to see Trump in a bad mood, because it means his plan's not going right. I love it that there are the three conservatives that he appointed to the Supreme Court are the ones who have voted against him on crucial issues, right? I mean, all of that is the immune system of the nation sort of saving itself and fighting off this pathogen.
I want to ask you more about that because I'm not sure if our immune system can defeat this pathogen. And I want to dig in that. But let me go back to something else I think is really important. You've got two little girls. It was Father's Day. It was kind of a weird Father's Day, I think, just because there was so much shit happening. And the day before was Saturday when we had the protest nationwide. We had the parade happening, the parade charade, and we had political assassinations. So I don't know about you, but I was like, okay, I'm putting on my dad hat, and we got Little League, but there also might be war with Iran and a nuke strike. Like, how do you sort through that, and how did you think about that weekend in particular? As I think you have a wisdom that I have talked about with you before. As an older dad, you're not a young guy. You like me had kids later in life. What was that like for you? What were you thinking?
Well, I mean, my children are my everything in my life right now. I mean, and my wife, of course. But my wife said, Barbara said, that we have a friend, a very close friend, who just had a serious surgery, and he just is not in a great place. And he said, listen, you should take a trip with him, right? Like, you guys need to spend some time together. And so she sort of kicked me out of the house to go spend a weekend with this friend of, I won't name him, but this friend of ours, and he needed it, I needed it. It was great, and she had the girls for the weekend. So we actually didn't celebrate Father's Day, except that two dads went off to smoke a couple of cigarettes and talk about their problems. Now that's a Father's Day.
But that's good, man. I mean, I think I want to build on that because I think there's a lot of stress, especially among everyone. But men have a harder time talking about their stress and talking about their burdens and their emotions. And you have, you and I have been friends now, I don't know, 20 years. Like we've been on parallel tracks and seen a lot of shit. You've been through a lot of trauma. You've lost friends. You've been to combat. You almost died. Can you talk about that? Your book, Tribe, was such a great exploration of how people connect. But can you talk about your thoughts on that need to connect and whether it's happening enough in our society right now, especially for men who, if they don't get it out, it can come out in bad ways, like political assassinations and riots and crazy shit we've seen around the world?
Well, you know, those, I mean, those people are mentally ill, and I'm like, there's this other male issue in society. I think it's worth discussing. I think violent rhetoric on the part of our political leaders actually brings those people out from under their rocks, right? So I think that's actually the problem with that violence. But so you know what I would say is that men they're really interesting. They create coalitions very easily. You get groups of 5, 6 men, 10 men doing things like very. They do that quite naturally, and those coalitions are one of the things that happens when they're in a group is that they actually don't talk about personal stuff because the group is a refuge from the torments of one's psyche, right?
Mhm.
Now you might track down a one male friend and say, "Listen, man, my marriage is on the rocks. Can we talk? I don't know what to do." Men do that with each other all the time, as needed, right? And if a friend of mine was going through a divorce, I would never say, "How's the divorce going?" I'd wait for him to bring it up. If he just wanted to shoot pool, that's all we would do, right? It's up to him. But when you get groups of guys together, they're there for the express purpose. In the old days, express purpose of hunting and defense, right? That's the original
Mhm.
point of the male coalition, as it's called by anthropologists. But in a modern context, it's like, okay, this is where I go to actually not think about all this painful, complicated stuff. And I need that, and I recharge. It's like parking your battery powered car at the charging station. I need this for half an hour. And I walk 400 miles on railroad lines as such a high speed vagrancy with a couple of combat vets and another guy, and from Washington D.C. to Philly to Pittsburgh, right? Sleeping under bridges, etc. I've told all about this, right? And in 400 miles, two of us were getting divorced. I was one of them. Two out of four were getting divorced. No one brought it up. No one asked. No one mentioned it. We walked all the way to Pittsburgh. And it's not that we didn't care about our divorces. It's not that we weren't in pain about it. But this was the refuge from that stuff that we were going to be going back home to when the trip was over.
Mm, mm. For folks that are watching on YouTube, they can see the poster over your shoulder of The Last Patrol.
Oh, yeah.
Was about that, right? And it was on
Yep.
HBO, and I recommend that. I recommend all of Sebastian's great work, everything from Restrepo to Tribe. But Sebastian, we men often come together around like a thing, right? Like it's a ball game, most likely, right? It used to be drinking, right? And I think maybe what I also wanted to ask you to build on is you're right. It is the people who are mentally ill that often go in that direction, but a lot of men are hurting themselves, right? And we see a suicide rate, we see depression, we see isolation, we see people pulling away from their families, from society. That's something you've talked a lot about and
Yep.
explored, not just with combat vets, but I think you've also given other people permission to talk about that. And I think that's part of what Trump is able to manipulate
Yep.
is that grievance, that need to be more of a man. I've been thinking a lot about how so many of the people that follow Trump and love this Hegseth shit are the people who would have joined the military, but right?
Right.
It's almost like an aspirational hero
Yeah.
culture to them, which is at a time when so few of us actually have served. But can you pull that apart a bit and what you think about that on the macro, but also this moment where it feels like there's a lot of weight crushing down on people in this country?
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, universally in the world, the traditional male role is to fight and defend the community if needed, right? And which isn't to say that women don't belong in our military, but it's sort of a matter of anthropology. Like that's the male role. Firemen, fire stations are almost exclusively male. The work that kills people regularly, almost exclusively male. Roofing crews, logging, whatever, almost exclusively male. Society depends on men to do those things, and it doesn't matter in reproductive terms. It doesn't matter if men get killed because they have almost no reproductive value, right? Like you can kill half the male population, the other half is going to have their work cut out for them, but within a generation, right, the population will be at the exact same level. Kill half the women in a society, it will never recover,
Mm,
right? So that's the male role. And they also do this male coalition thing very, very well. And they love hierarchies, right? And hierarchies work when you're, in a sort of coordinated tactical situation. So a friend of mine was, a woman friend of mine was sort of complaining, a woman friend of mine who may not have been my wife, she was complaining that men don't plan ahead at all. It's like, because I'd forgotten to pack the lunchbox in the backpack, whatever. Like, you've been there, right? And they don't plan ahead at all. And I was like, I know we don't. Then I was like, we actually plan ahead really well when we're killing things, right? Have you ever seen guys plan on a deer hunt, right? Or a
That's true.
combat patrol? I mean, to the last detail. So there you see, as this sort of fossil remnant of these archaic roles that I think are often rooted in biology, right? You see that in modern society, even in this form. But so, what are you going to do if you're a sort of like low wage earning man in a modern industrial society with a huge uh, income gap between rich and poor? Uh, and there really aren't any situations of actual physical threat where you could actually step into what everyone knows is a quote traditional male role. Like, you're sort of deprived of your moment, right? And the firemen, the cops, they take care of that shit, right? And like, so when there's an opportunity to perform that role rather than actually act that role, how often are you going to walk down the street and there's a house fire and a kid dangling from a balcony so that you can run up the gutter and save him? Almost never. I mean, if you're lucky, maybe, but almost never. So what do? You have to perform it, right? And my heart goes out to those guys because it's very, very painful to think, wow, I think I would be a hero, but I will never find out. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that's, and but then it crosses over into this sort of toxic place where the way they show that they're a hero is by tattooing M4s all over their body like Hegseth does. I mean, at that point, you're like, you're a child, right? That's child stuff. That's not real. That's not manhood. That's not anything. It's not adulthood. Like, you're performing at something.
I want to stay on this because I think it's one of the most important conversations not really happening in America. I've talked to Scott Galloway's been on, and he talks about it a bit. Wes Moore, a friend, the governor of Maryland, has now launched an initiative focused on men and boys. I've recommended a lot of people check out Richard Reeves' work. I hope he'll join me on the show. But let me ask you a really straight up question, because you think about this, you study this, you write about this. Right now in America, who's raising our boys? A lot of folks aren't going to church or where they used to go. They're not joining the military. Less and less men are involved in sports. I know that I and others in our community try to take an active role to be positive role models for all children, but especially the boys. When you look at it, Sebastian,
Yeah.
who the hell? I mean, now you've got kids who've been living for 10 years of their life under Trump, right? My child's entire childhood, my older boy, has been Trump. Who the fuck is raising America's boys?
Well, in every society, communities have always raised children, right? I mean, it's a communal endeavor because humans have always existed in pretty small communities, and the children are running between the huts, and dipping into everyone's stew pot, right? I mean, it's just
Right.
that's it, right? So now, in a sort of modern industrial society, community is less and less part of all of our experience, right? And so, yeah, men are sort of lonely, et cetera, et cetera. One of the reasons they're lonely is that none of us really have community. Women, right? They are actually more focused on creating community, which is creates a liability. I mean, and so through social media, particularly young women are particularly vulnerable to feeling inferior, inadequate, judged, etc., and being depressed and anxious and even suicidal. And it's because of their sort of affiliative, like community-oriented default setting that they're vulnerable to that. So the men, like, because they're not as social as women, they're not as verbal, they're not as social, they're maybe a little less prone to the dangers that come with sociability, right?
Mhm.
But back to your question, um, who's raising our kids, right? Our boys and our girls. Well, it's not the community. Kids can't even play in their front lawn because everyone's terrified, right? Um, most of the child rearing in America, rightly or wrongly, uh, it's not evenly divided between men and women. I don't know what it is, 2/3, 1/3, something like. So you're more likely to be substantially raised by your mother, particularly as an infant and a young child, right? And then the statistics are overwhelming for elementary school teachers, overwhelmingly female, right? which is great. I mean, there are skills that come with gender, and one of the skills of sort of decoding the human expression and how a person's feeling just at a glance. I mean, sometimes guys fail that test completely, right? Like with their
Mm.
girlfriend. Women are really good at it, so that sort of makes sense. But there's also a real women don't necessarily understand everything that boys need, because boys need to imitate men, and if they're not around for one reason or another, there's a big hole there, and they'll fill it with, potentially fill it with macho posturing.
Mm. Yeah, it's so interesting. This morning I took my son's third grade class to their field day, right? And watching all of this unfold, right? And I think a lot about how there are almost no male teachers. If they're there, they're gym teachers, right? Or they're a para, they're some kind of specialist. You see very few male teachers, and I think that's important because men do need role models. They do need to understand that they can be teachers and educators. But I feel like in my generation a bit, maybe your generation, the default was like maybe you got raised by television.
Yeah.
Now, what I worry, and I saw this walking with, you got some kids who have the parents involved, they have some other mentor role model. A lot of them are being raised by the internet.
Oh, totally. Yep.
And that is fucking terrifying because it's beyond the Wild West. And we see the radicalization, we see the isolation, we see the programming, and I'm seeing that. I can tell you which kids in my son's class are just on the internet too much, right?
Yeah.
Because it feels like they're hooked up to the machine, right?
Oh, totally.
So
Yep.
can you talk about, Sebastian, this moment, right, where it feels like a breaking point for America, but at least for our norms? And specifically, I just want to ask you to break down Los Angeles. You spent a lot of time in Los Angeles. You know this country. You know the National Guard. You know the Marines. You know the PD. I mean, you've been around and you have friends in all these places, but you understand them in a way that I don't think most folks talking about these things do. And I view you as a public intellectual, a thought leader who can help us understand. Just LA, what are you thinking about LA, and what do you think people need to be thinking about LA?
Well, I think the protests in LA were about the enforcement of immigration laws, right? And they were rounding up people who, I mean, just to take our own laws at face value, literally, who were not here legally, right? These are bipartisan laws, and Trump decided to enforce them, and enforce them in quite a cruel way, right? So what do we do? I think Trump wanted to find out that he could demonstrate his immense power, right, by crushing protests in a liberal city, right? And what we found out, and what I hope is that there's a real conversation about a sort of amnesty program where illegal migrants who are working and have not broken the law and are acting in good faith can maybe get work permits so that they'll pay taxes and aren't worried about being people. I mean, that would be an adult conversation for a nation to have, right? But I think what we found out with this, I think Trump badly erred in this tactic, right? The polling sucks for him on the use of military, particularly Marines, with all of the honor of their service behind them being dumped in the streets of LA and basically having nothing to do, right? Like the public polling on that was not good for Trump. But more sort of like strategically for the oppositional left, which I'm part of. I mean, I'll just say that is that Pete Hegseth told us that the dollar cost of one weekend of not that many soldiers, Marines, in National Guard in Los Angeles was $150 million, right? So it didn't take me long to think, wow, if we really wanted to throw a wrench in this, if Trump crossed some kind of basic line, no habeas corpus for U.S. citizens, right? No, whatever all the list of our core rights, if any of that gets touched, but wow, mass protests in 40 cities, Trump is helpless. 150 million a pop in 40 cities, right? Like the federal government and the military reserves could not handle that, and now we know because we didn't know the cost. Now we know, like, oh, crosses a real red line where everyone, even like MAGA, like that. No, you can't just throw someone in jail and not give them a trial. You cannot do that in this country. And if that starts to happen, 40 cities for 40 days. You know what I mean? Like it's like that.
I want to drill down on that because I think he is doing it. He doesn't care what the courts say. He doesn't care about poll numbers. He doesn't care about what the judges are going to rule. And I think in many ways, he's still chugging along. Yeah, Hegseth has got fuck ups. Yeah, the parade wasn't great, but strategically, he's moving forward in his objectives. And one of them was to find a test case where he could deploy the National Guard and federalize them. He could send the Marines in. And with all due respect, like America's not that pissed off about it, right? They're still there. There's not mass protest against this glass breaking, shattering of norms that's happening. And I feel like the danger here is he's kind of lulling us into it. And then comes Chicago, and then comes New York, right? A couple other cities. And you just have the National Guard out there in the back, right? Like, and it feels like they're doing checkpoints on 9/11 at the bridges and tunnels.
Well, no, but the thing is, I mean, look, I'm fully sympathetic to the cause of undocumented migrants and protecting their basic human dignity, right? Like, don't get me wrong,
Of course,
right?
yeah.
But if you're going to ask the public to a mass mobilization by the right-minded public to stop fascism in the streets of America, it's not going to be over an issue where like the law is the law and they're breaking it, right? Don't do it over immigration, right? I mean, do it over someone arresting Paul Rieckhoff and throwing him in prison because we've had enough of your mouth, sir. You're going away for a while, right? Like, do it over that. I mean, that's a core constitutional right, which the issues in LA with immigration, frankly, are not, right? I'm not a constitutional scholar. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like you really want to pick your moment for this, and it's got to be where an absolute red line that separates democracies from non-democracies, where that red line has been crossed. France is perfectly capable of rounding up undocumented migrants and shipping them out. So is England. So is every country in Europe. That's not the red line that we need to. And when you cross that red line, I'm quite sure that the American public will be like, we're opposing this until it stops. We're going nowhere, right? And I think, among other things, they could just bankrupt the Trump administration by just doing it everywhere at once for as long as we need to.
So are we missing a Navalny moment? Is that what it is? I mean, right, we've got this moment where I hear what you're saying, and I think you're right. And I think some people are upset about what ICE is doing, operating in masks, rolling in and taking people out without due process, right? But he threatened to put Governor Newsom in jail. He's threatened to put, Senator Padilla got roughed up last week, right? I mean, Speaker Johnson said he wants Gavin Newsom tarred and feathered. So are we like a Navalny moment away from having that person put in jail, where that person becomes a rally point for people to come out of the woodwork and say, all right, that's enough. You can do all this other shit, but you can't put a governor in jail.
Right. And there's free speech in this country. I can say I think Trump should be in jail. Right. I have the right to say that. Trump can say I should be in jail. I mean, we all have the right to say those things. It's irresponsible for a president to say it. I got you, right? We're on the same page. But if you just want to look at the law, right, that's free speech. Like, sorry, right? And that should get him booted from office by Republicans in Congress. But it's not. So, like, but it's not a Navalny moment. Navalny was poisoned, almost died from the poison, thrown in jail, and essentially killed in jail, right? That, when that happens, it's a Navalny moment. But don't sell Navalny short by saying, oh, this, the threat to tar and feather governor, it's not. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but, they have to cross that line. They have to do it. They have to do it. And when they do it, I hope this nation is out on the streets like immediately in mass numbers and does not go away. And I think they will be. There's boycotts, there's strikes, walkouts, boycotting goods. I mean, you could cripple this country really quickly. And it's a very effective tool against fascism is just a boycott, right? I mean, you just don't buy stuff for a week. I mean, the regimes don't survive long without oxygen. I'll put it that way.
Okay, so where does this go? Like, and I'll ask you to also maybe touch, if you can, on, you have a very deep understanding of the civil military divide. Trump gave this, awful speech at Fort Bragg that crossed all the lines. He did the parade. And I also think there's another part that I've been watching on LA and trying to bring attention to. There's no area commander giving everybody a daily update, right? It'd be nice to see, here is National Guard commander, whoever, Marine Corps commander, whoever, is designated as the head of this area of operations to give you a daily update. Today, we arrested 25 people. Today,
Right.
we did this. Here's the general state. Curfew's on, curfew's off, like they did in Iraq and so many other places, right? So
Right.
that breakdown has happened intentionally, in my view. But where do you think this goes, man? Like where do you think we are in a couple of months from now? Is he going to slowly push this out? Is he going to pull back? The military is now become a political chew toy in a way we've never seen. Where do you think we go from here?
Well, I mean, I've argued with my friends over this. I don't, I think, I've talked with, I argue with my liberal friends and I talk with my conservative friends. It's very funny. One of my conservative friends is, I mean, my liberal friends are always freaking out, right? And my conservative friends talk to them, and I said, to this one woman who's like a conservative, lifelong Catholic, married to a retired Marine general whose father was in the Marines and lives in the Deep South, right? So check every box, and a
Yeah.
sweetheart and a very, very smart woman and utterly wonderful. And we're friends, right? Like, and so I'll ask her, I'm like, hey, what about that? Because partly I like to needle her, and partly I'm curious, like, well, how is the conservative mind thinking about this stuff, right? And much like the National Review often, she is appalled by the Trump administration, right? Appalled. And Hegseth, oh my God, she can barely speak about him. She's so upset. And what she basically said to me was, listen, tell me what to do. The Democrats need to win in the midterms. She's a hardcore Republican, right? Only the Democrats can save this country. The Republicans won't do it anymore. They need to win in the midterms. What can I do? Does Seth Moulton need advice? Like, she worked at the Pentagon. She knows this shit, right? She's like, what can I do? I'll be your secret agent. I'm going to whisper. I'll be the Republican whisperer, right? So where does this go? I mean, the trend line is that his poll numbers continue sinking and sort of bottom out at the 33% hardcore molten MAGA, that aren't really making choices about things. They have an identity and they're not thinking about it, right? So it bottoms out there. I think, the clearly the economy is at risk. The polling on not only on Trump himself, but on the issues like immigration, how he handled Los Angeles, terrorists, the polling also sucks for him, like in the 30s, right? So I don't think he can survive like this very long. And so I said to my conservative friend, I don't think Trump has a very strong hand, and I think he knows it. And she was in the Trump administration the first time around, right? And she's like, no, you're right. He doesn't have a strong hand, and he does know it. And she's like, I'm just worried he's going to start a nuclear war.
Well, so let me
Yeah.
flip that and say, maybe what if he does have a strong hand? Because everything he's done has not required congressional approval anyway, right? The deployment of the National Guard, the sending in of the Marines, all the other shit he wants to do, deployment of ICE. Congress hasn't stopped him. The Democrats haven't stopped him. If the Democrats held the House right now, I mean, what could they do? They could try to deny funding, but he's still going to do it. So the question is it's like this race, right? Where if he doesn't give a fuck about the midterms and he's just pushing toward how far he can go before he is assumingly defeated at the ballot box, I mean, maybe impeached, maybe he dies. There's all those other scenarios. But I think there's another piece of this that people underestimate. He may just be running till the wheels come off.
Yeah.
Without
sure.
a regard. So if
Yeah.
that's the case, and people are rightfully concerned about a nuke strike with what's happening in Israel and Iran, I mean, he could do a lot of damage, Sebastian, between now and 3 more years, right?
Oh yeah, I'm not saying there's no damage, right? I mean, I got it. I'm just trying to figure out if we're going to have a democracy at the end of this when we survey the smoking ruin of our country, right? And so my point is that, I mean, yeah, I mean, listen, I don't know the specifics of how the government works that well, but Congress does have the power of the purse if they choose to exercise it, which the Republicans haven't. And there's some level of opposition where they can override an executive order, right? And so, and the courts have been amazing in stopping him, right? And actually, as much as he says he can ignore the courts, he's not.
But right now, let's use that as an example, just to play devil's advocate here, right?
Yeah.
Court has said they ruled against the National Guard that's supposed to take effect on Tuesday, but they're still there, right? They're still there.
Yeah.
And then on Tuesday, there's going to be an appeal. Hegseth has already said national security should not be determined by. So we keep reading these crossroad points, and I think the next crossroad point is when a court says the guard has to leave, and he says no. Then what?
Well, the president does not decide what's legal or illegal. The courts do, and every commander knows they cannot obey an illegal order. So it's up to the.
So take that all the way through, because this is what I've seen from the left too, right? You've seen it too. People are like, send this to all your friends in the military, right? And it's some like GI hotline. You don't have to follow an unlawful order. You guys should all rebel. And there's these protesters to, hey, drop your weapons and quit the army. Like, you and I know that's not going to happen, because what they haven't been given any unlawful orders.
Right.
But understanding that piece, which I think is really important, right? The continuity of the National Guard, the diversity that does still exist. His speech at Fort Bragg, his speech at West Point. Do you think the military can fray? Do you think generals will speak out? Do you think that folks will break ranks, and we'll see what I would argue is not just a constitutional crisis, but a civil military crisis?
I mean, I don't know, but I'm amazed at how resilient it is. I don't think active duty generals should speak out, right? I mean, except in the most appalling circumstances, right? But they should speak with their actions. And yeah, stuff's getting appealed, as it should, and blah, blah, blah. The process unfolds. And so maybe it won't be LA, maybe it'll be Detroit 6 months from now.
Yeah.
But if the court says you cannot deploy the National Guard without being in consultation with the governor, if the courts rule that, the National Guard commander in Michigan or whatever, unless he's a real or she's a real Trump acolyte, right? But I imagine they would say, and their JAGs would say, "Listen, sir, it's in a legal order. Like, do not follow it, right? And until the governor gives his approval." And I don't know, but
This is what I'm worried about, right? Because they've hollowed out the JAG Corps. Now you've got the balkanization, where, yeah, maybe the California National Guard will say no. But what about the Arkansas National Guard, where Huckabee Sanders is the governor, and they're disproportionately Republican, and they really love Trump, and they say, hey, your president told you to do this. And Hegseth's talking in the ear saying the courts are full of liberal activist judges. Like, this is possible, right? It may be unrealistic, but we're seeing the balkanization, whether it's small or large. There is a balkanization that's happening around our military, right?
As long as the Arkansas National Guard doesn't invade Colorado or whatever it borders. As long as that doesn't happen, if they want to use the Arkansas National Guard to oppress conservatives in Arkansas, go for it.
But here's what they'll do too. They can send the Arkansas National Guard down to the Texas border, and the Texas governor will let them.
Right. All right. But those are still conservative states violating democratic norms to the detriment of all of their voters, all of their citizens, right? It's like, you voted for them. You all want to do this to yourselves. Go for it. But do not invade Massachusetts with the Rhode Island National Guard. That will be a fight, sir.
Oh, see, but I mean, we joke, but we know, right? Like, I've been in the Florida National Guard. I've been in the New York National Guard. They are very different. Like, I was in a Florida National Guard unit from the Panhandle, and then I was in, a unit in Manhattan, right? Like, I've been in different units, and they are very, very different. You know the old saying, if you've seen one VA, you've seen one VA. I mean, the National Guard is very different around this country, right? But let me ask you, I don't want to lose you without talking on one subject.
Yeah.
I love talking to you. I could talk to you for hours. You've been a great supporter of Ukraine, and you joined to help support American veterans for Ukraine. You've been outspoken about Ukraine. Ukraine is kind of getting put in the rearview mirror for some right now, especially now with Israel and Iran happening. Can you give us just your update on Ukraine? What you think, where you think it is, what you think is important to watch for now and to think about?
God, I mean, I've never been there, and I read the newspaper like everybody else or whatever. That's all I really know. But, it feels like it's sort of a marathon, like which country can survive longest. And, the Russian economy is sort of running on fumes, manpower, machinery, it's all kind of running on fumes. The Ukrainians are completely fucking with them, right? And deep in their country, right? And the Russians are slowly taking over very small bits of territory in Ukraine, right? Will that gather momentum and then suddenly they're in Kyiv? I don't know. I doubt it. But in 3 years, they expanded their control of Ukraine minimally. Like, so what are you talking, 20 years war? I mean, they were in Afghanistan for 10 and that didn't work. And that was Afghanistan, right?
Mhm.
Like, and I think NATO and the EU, they realize that, Ukraine is their buffer from Russian aggression, and they better fund them and help them if they don't want to fight the Russians themselves. So for me, it's not a foregone conclusion that it's a long grinding war that will eventually destroy Ukraine. it could, but I don't think that's at all an assumption we need to make.
Mm. You've generously offered to stick around for a couple extra questions for our Patreon members. To those folks, thank you for making this kind of content possible. You know, your support gives the oxygen that we need to make this kind of stuff happen. So Sebastian's going to stick around with some exclusive content just for you. Final question for you, man. This week was your Alive Day, I think, right? I have it on my calendar. The day where you almost died.
Yep.
Having gone through that experience, you probably look at everything differently. You've written about it extensively. You've talked about it extensively. But what perspective does it give you now as everybody feels like they're under attack or that everyone is concerned? There's this general aura of stress and anxiety. What does it afford you, whether it's in dealing with these macro issues or just dealing with your kids? I imagine that you might say there are some gifts or advantages that came out of that, but what did it give you that you didn't have before to help you deal with this moment?
I mean, I risk sounding sort of trite and whatever, but if you almost die, I mean, I've been at a couple of close calls in Afghanistan and elsewhere. A momentary trauma, it didn't really deepen me as a person or as a thinker particularly, right? But almost dying and experiencing the dying process, because I bled out, so I got right to the edge of the precipice. I remember what it felt like, and I came back, and it has given me, in some ways, this sort of blessing is that it's very easy for me to stop the clamor in my head and ignore the clamor in the world and just be amazed that I and my children and any of us exists. Just amazed. Like, are you fucking kidding? This happens, right? Like, are you kidding? A bunch of mineral dust has reconfigured itself as a human being, and it can think about itself and its children. I feel like, what a freak show, right? And so I'm 63 and I only have 20 whatever years to think what a freak show, but I'm definitely going to think that, right? What a blessed, amazing, gorgeous event this thing is, right? And whoever's freaking president, right? So that I can get there. And then on the other more mundane level, um anything, I will do anything that protects my children from moral or physical harm, anything, right? And if circumstances require that, I will rise to it. And I hope they don't, right? But that's where I'm at as a person. Like I have no longer any interest in myself as a person. I have an interest in myself as a father, and my job is to protect them and my wife. And that's it. And that's that I see politics entirely through that lens.
Whew. You are an amazing, a beautiful, gorgeous human being that gives this to us. I mean, I feel so lucky to have your friendship and your wisdom. America needs to hear that perspective and all of your perspective now more than ever. I've said this to you before. I think you're one of the most important, not just writers, but thinkers and consciences for this country and really for everything happening in the world. And every chance I get to talk to you, I am grateful and thankful. So thank you for giving us and ending on a positive note that people can reflect on and I hope take with them. That's a gift. But you continue to give this country great gifts, man. And you're the best kind of patriot. Thank you for all you do, my friend.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Take care. I'll see you soon.
Sebastian Junger for president, folks. There he is. Stay vigilant, my friend. All right, I hope you liked that conversation with Sebastian Junger. If you did, please share it far and wide. If you're not watching us on YouTube, please go there, check us out, subscribe, and share, and encourage others to check us out there where you can see this entire conversation. And if you're a Patreon member, you can get the extended content as well. And you can go back and see the other 5 times Sebastian Junger has been on this show. Sebastian's another example of someone who runs in when others run out. Sebastian is another example of a true helper. The helpers are out there. We saw them all across America, especially in the 200 plus protests that happened all across our nation. If you're one of them or you want to shout out a helper, let me know. Find me on social media or use the hashtag #LookForTheHelpers_now. They're out there and we need them now more than ever. All right, summertime is finally here. And that brings me to Rieckhoff's recommendations. My recommendations today are 2 things that are specifically about summer. So, here they are, my starting 2025 summer Rieckhoff's recommendations. First off, here in Soho, there are a lot of things, including that place, the Museum of Ice Cream. Summertime is about taking a break. Summertime is about celebrating the best of what life has to offer. Summertime is about being a kid again. And summertime is about ice cream. So this is a really simple recommendation. Eat more ice cream. Ice cream can be a little moment of joy. My kids and I have Friday ice cream every single Friday. We started it in the pandemic to give them something to look forward to have a celebration, to have something that would bring us together in a shared experience, and we've kept it up ever since. So this is a pretty easy one. This summer, enjoy some ice cream. Summer is also about something else. It's about summer break and the end of the school year. My boys only have about a week left of school, and to say they are excited is an understatement. It's also a time where thousands of veterans are graduating all across America, veterans who went to school because of the GI Bill. It's a time for families to come together to celebrate the hard work and determination of one of their own. So no matter where you are, you probably know someone that could be young or could be older that just finished a year of school. Reach out and congratulate them. Congratulate them on making it through another school year. Congratulate them on graduating. Congratulate them on that degree, or congratulate them on just sticking it out. But especially in times like these, we have to find ways and times to celebrate. And there's nothing finer than celebrating a young person or any person who just completed a year bettering themselves, making them smarter, and improving themselves as a leader. Because we need them now more than ever. So this summer, celebrate the students. All summer long, stay tuned for more episodes that I hope will bring you light to contrast the heat. And look for me every Wednesday on News Nation television. Look for me frequently on MSNBC on most Wednesdays and Thursdays. Look for me occasionally on CNN. Be sure to sign up for our Substack, where we're now pushing out content constantly to keep you updated, informed, and engaged. And if you like this episode with Sebastian, please be sure to share it far and wide. Share that hope, people, because hope is the oxygen of democracy. And now is most definitely a time to stay vigilant. And remember, you are not alone in your vigilance. We are all in this together. And as independents, we are especially leading forward a new movement that can add light to contrast the heat. People over politics, busting up the status quo, and generating and growing and pushing a new movement that puts country over party. Until next time, down with Hamas, down with Putin, Slava Ukraine, and stay vigilant, America. And congratulations to all our graduates. You're moving on up.
Powered by Righteous Media.